what do you call that? People, there's moksha and self-realization. How do you describe the final
happiness?
Yeah. Well, that'll do. Okay. Because,
but just to be a little bit more specific, what's called moksha or liberation is also called enlightenment or awakening or illumination or nirvana or all those terms refer to the recognition of our true nature. That is not just the recognition I am awareness, but the recognition that the awareness that we know ourselves to be, or rather that knows itself to be in us, doesn't share the limitations of the mind and the body. That recognition is what is traditionally called enlightenment or moksha, and it's called moksha because it liberates us from the belief of being a separate, temporary, finite consciousness. But it is not, there is another stage or process, and it's an endless process after that, in which the way we think, feel, act, perceive, and relate is gradually realigned with that understanding. So although moksha or enlightenment or awakening, or simply, I refer to it as the recognition of our true nature because it sounds less exotic. Although it puts an it puts an end to the separate self, the echo of the separate self continues for some time in the body-mind. So the traditional image that Ramana Maharshi uses is when you unplug a fan, that cuts off the power to the fan, but the fan doesn't come to an end straight away. It carries on running due to the force of, due to the momentum. So the unplugging of the fan is the recognition of our true nature. The gradual winding down of the rotation of the fan is the cleaning out of the body-mind of the old residues of thinking and feeling on behalf of a separate self. And sorry, just one more thing. That process, which is in fact an endless process, results in the stabilization or the establishment of what we are in all realms of experience. And the common name for it is peace or happiness.
I often hear people say, lots of people on this path get glimpses of that, but the real aim is for permanent happiness or permanent realization.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if this is just an idea, or is there such a thing as being in that state permanently?
Let's call it almost permanent.
Yes. As you said earlier in the week, there was an amazing statement about if something finite is seen, then this becomes finite as well.
Yes.
And when I had that experience I spoke of, the opposite was true, where everything was seen as this infinite substance that I was, and that became infinite as well.
Yes, exactly.
But myself prevailed everywhere first, and then the object or something came in as an aspect of that.
Yes, that's why the separate inside self and the separate outside world arise together. They are co-created as, in fact, two aspects of the same belief. You can't have an inside self without an outside world, and you can't have an outside world without an inside self. In other words, you can't have mind without matter or matter without mind. That's why Ramana Maharshi said, the I thought is the mother of the world. The separate I thought gives birth. The separate inside self gives birth to the outside world. In fact, it would be more accurate to say they're co-created in the imagination at the same time.
Well, okay. I mean, I lived in that sort of heaven on earth for some months, but
that's what's meant by heaven on earth, by the way. You're right. That's the meaning of the phrase heaven on earth.
And earlier in the week you said about you have to learn, it's like being born again. Everything is fresh, and all the old stuff is not there anymore.
Yes.
It's a whole new world you're living in.
Yes.
But that's gradually, for some reason, I don't know, it's just sort of worn away over the years, and that's why the question came up. There's glimpses of it, but and of course the awareness that you speak of, the I consciousness, is always there and always the same and always fresh.
Yes.
So there's no doubt about that. So I just wondered if you had a comment about this permanence, and when you said it's almost permanent, if it isn't, there's more to do.
The reason I say it's not permanent, because permanent is so, we have to be open to the possibility that some event might happen, some situation that would trigger an old feeling or response that will just temporarily and briefly seem to take one's away. So we're not too... We can never say never.
Yes.
Who knows what's around the corner?
Yes. Yes.
And permanent is too... There's something kind of rigid, like permanent.
Yes. It's sort of in time, whereas that experience is outside of time.
Yes. And we just have to be open to the possibility that, yes, it is lasting happiness that everyone seeks. And such a happiness cannot be dependent on circumstances. So as one gets established in one's true nature, more and more, this happiness becomes stable. Somebody asked Atmananda Krishna Menon, how do you know when you're established in your true nature? And he said, when the thoughts, feelings, sensations, and perceptions can no longer take you away. So I would just slightly modify that and say when 99% of the thoughts, feelings, sensations, and perceptions can no longer take you away.
Yes.
Because we have to be open. We never want to say, I'm perfect. There's nothing else for me to learn. There's no end. It can go on forever, this outshining of the body-mind. Let me put this in a metaphor, and actually it was triggered by the conversation we had yesterday with I don't know the gentleman's name about this painting, and at one stage I think it was Elizabeth mentioned that not only the background was the background of all the objects and the people was painted in gold in order to bring the attention to the bright light of awareness behind and all objects and within which all objects appear. But Elizabeth commented, and I ignored the comment at the time because I was on another track, but it was a relevant comment, that the garments are also outlined in gold. And that's also it's a very beautiful image, and it has meaning. When on a stormy day, in fact, it could easily have been today. I don't think it's happening now. The phrase, every cloud has a silver lining. Sometimes on a day like today, there's a grey cloud, but it has a silver lining. It's tinged in gold. like the borders of the robes. What is that gold? It's just the hint of the ever-present sunlight behind the cloud. And it just tinges the object. The object is obscuring the sun in the same way that the objects, thoughts, sensations, and perceptions seem to obscure our true nature. But this silver lining, or this gold around the garments, is the indication, in other words, that the object is surrounded by consciousness. And in some of our meditations this week, we've taken a similar image. We've said something like, see that your thoughts, sensations, and perceptions are appearing in consciousness. So here we have these objects, thoughts, sensations, and perceptions, and they are like clouds floating in consciousness. And that's the first stage. And if we were to draw, if I were to do a painting of the world, I would paint every object, every tree, every flower, everything. And to begin with, I would just trace it with a gold line and put a gold line around every object in the same way that these garments are tinged with gold to indicate the light of consciousness which shines around them. But then you might do another painting of the same scene, but in this time, instead of just putting the gold line around the object, within the object you'd put little spots of gold to indicate that the light of consciousness behind the object was just beginning to shine through it, not just around it. And then in your next painting, you'd put a few more dots. And you'd do a series of paintings, and in each painting there would be more gold dots and less object, to indicate that the object was gradually becoming transparent to the light of awareness. And so it is a gradual dissolution of the density and solidity of what previously seemed to be an object made out of something other than awareness. And this is what's called the transfiguration, or the establishment process. It's when the having recognized our true nature, we then go back to the objects of the mind, body, and world, thoughts, sensations, and perceptions, to see, first of all, they appear in our true nature. But then, and this is what we were doing in the meditation this morning, they don't just appear in it, they are made of it. That was the experience that you had. And in other words, that the objects, the density of the objects becomes more and more transparent, more and more open, more and more transfused, saturated with the light of awareness, until there is this feeling in the end, almost the entire object would be painted in gold, because it is shining with the light of awareness. And that's when we realize all there is to our experience is knowing. And that's the experience you described, when everything seemed to be made out of the infinite reality of yourself. And this is one of my favorite quotes. Sorry, many of you have heard it many times. William Blake. When the doors of perception are cleansed, everything will appear to man as it truly is, infinite. When the way we see the world is cleansed of the subject-object relationship, all these that we previously thought of as objects will be seen as infinite, the face of God, shining with the light of infinite awareness. And so you were given that experience. So God gave you that experience free of charge several years ago. And then the old habits come back again. And now you are being given ways to consciously make your way back there, having been given a taste of this, and this taste has whetted your appetite for it. But then God said, okay, now I'm just going to close the doors of perception again, and you have to find me again. And it is that process of finding that experience yourself again that really makes the experience your own. And it stabilizes you in that experiential understanding.
Yeah, I found this morning that this idea of investigating the seeing and not the seen, and investigating the knowing and not the known, that's so powerful.
Yes, exactly.
And it just took me back home.
Exactly.
Not so much that I found a home, it's just that all the clutter was cleared away.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you.